I don't feel the need to set the record straight. Those are words from Colin Strickland, who's recently broken his silence. He's also returned to the home that he shared with Kaitlin Armstrong, who's still on the run. Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. So in this episode, we're going to look at some of the statements Colin Strickland made to The Sun. I'll also put a link to that in the description, and also some of the photos taken of Colin Strickland at his home, tinkering on his bicycle and I guess on his car. So we'll look at that. But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks icon if you want to make a contribution or express your appreciation. And let's get started. It can't be easy being Colin Strickland right now. He's lost not only the love of his life, but in a way too, he's lost his sponsors, they've abandoned him, and he's got to be wondering how to get back from this. How is he going to get back from this? Think about it. Essentially, he's got to be asking himself, when can I show my face at an event again? When can I show up? Am I going to be booed? Am I going to be embraced? What's going to happen? Perhaps it's no coincidence that he was seen wearing a shirt with the word revival written on it. He's also been seen tinkering with tools on a bicycle and a vehicle. It seems to be the psychology of fixing what's broken. Oscar Pistorius found himself in the same dilemma, only a lot worse. At one stage, when it seemed he was only going to serve a light sentence, questions were raised about him still having time to compete in the next Olympics. I'm sure he was thinking about it too, but the question was, what would sponsors say and how would the public react? And the trick was to find a way to get back into the good graces of the public and be allowed to do what he wanted to do again. But how to shape the narrative, how to spin the public relations. Now with Colin Strickland, I suppose the question that everyone is asking is, what was really going on at the Deep Eddy pool hours before Mo was killed by his girlfriend? It seems to me it would be a fairly simple matter to clear the air. If they were training at the pool, then probably that workout would have been recorded on Strava and the training would account for what they were doing. But if they weren't training, then it's difficult to imagine it was just an innocent platonic meeting. If that's the case, then Strickland not being clear about this may make it harder for the cycling community to forgive him. After all, forgiveness comes with the confessing of sins, the full confessing of sins. Right now, despite apparently lying low, Strickland is back at the home he shared with Kaitlin. It can't be terribly easy to sleep in the same bed as the perpetrator, or for that matter, to clear his head when the signs of his former life are all around him. Now, going to the article from The Sun, when they asked him how he's been coping since Mo Wilson's death and Armstrong going on the lam, Colin said, quote, "I'm not doing well. Why not? Drama and catastrophe." Now, drama is an interesting word to use in this context. It sounds more than a little facetious, even minimizing, given his key position in fomenting the drama. He also said, quote, "I'm just focusing on things I have right in front of my face that I have control of as I try to put the pieces of my life back together." But putting one's life back together isn't as simple as grabbing a tool and tightening a bolt. In fact, I remember Chris Watts using those words, "I will fix this." Part of putting a life back together is being straight about what went wrong in his former life, being honest and straight about exactly what went wrong in the first place. Going back to the article, when Strickland was asked if he wanted to set the record straight, he responded, quote, "I don't think it's time for that. I think it's still time to grieve this horrific event," end quote. If Kaitlin is captured and there is a trial, Strickland will no doubt be called to testify. And then he will have to set the record straight. When he says, "I don't think it's time for that," one has to ponder, what else is there time for, especially if it's him? I mean, he's not training, so what else is he thinking about? What else are we thinking about? Going back to the article, it says, quote, "Strickland said it was pretty obvious that Kaitlin should surrender, but added, I'm not really thinking about Kaitlin. That's outside my realm of control. Obviously, she's not going to be the same human that I knew. I would say she's one of the least volatile people I've ever met, and that's why it's so absolutely shocking, end quote. I don't know why, but that just sounds a little bit disingenuous given what we know about it. That's not what a certain anonymous tipster told the authorities, and in fact told the Austin Police Department on May 14, 3 days after the incident. According to the affidavit, quote, the caller refused to be identified but advised she was with Armstrong in January 2022. A caller advised that Armstrong had just discovered Strickland was having a romantic relationship with Ms. Wilson, even though Armstrong and Strickland were still dating. The caller advised that Armstrong became furious and was shaking in anger. Armstrong told the caller that Armstrong was so angry that Armstrong wanted to kill Ms. Wilson. So she obviously expressed that. Armstrong then proceeded to tell the caller that she had either recently purchased a firearm or was going to. Armstrong reportedly knew of Miss Wilson because they had both dated Strickland in the past. Now, if this caller knew about Armstrong's temper, then why wouldn't someone who'd been dating her for 3 years? I think the question is whether the tipster informed Colin about Armstrong's reaction, and if she did, whether Strickland pursued a relationship regardless. We also know Armstrong confronted Mo Wilson and also confronted Strickland, leading him to change Mo's name on his phone. Strickland also admitted to deleting texts from Wilson to Armstrong so that she wouldn't see them. He also admitted to the cops that he knew Armstrong called Wilson, with Kaitlin telling Mo that she was Strickland's girlfriend. It does seem as though both Strickland and Wilson knew how Armstrong felt about the dalliance, and met secretly in Austin on that fateful afternoon of May 11th, regardless. The combination of Armstrong expressing in January that she wanted to kill Wilson and Strickland buying Armstrong a gun is certainly tragic, and while Strickland may not have been expected to foresee that outcome, we'd expect plenty of contrition given the outcome. If Strickland knew Armstrong had threatened Mo, and let's face it, Mo could simply have told him this, and if he pursued Mo regardless, then he still has some real owning up to do, doesn't he? Strickland also told The Sun, quote, Kaitlin had sides to her personality that I don't think she shared with anybody. I had no indication of anything like that, end quote. Well, obviously she'd shared this aspect certainly with Mo and with this anonymous tipster. And I think people are wondering whether the same doesn't apply to Strickland, that he also has other sides to his personality. The Sun quotes him saying the following as well. He was asked if he believes the claims that Armstrong may be posing as her sister, Christine. Colin Strickland responded, quote, how is that relevant to me? I'm working on effing cars all day. That's what I'm doing. I'm not following the effing news. It's not in my realm of control. There's nothing I can do except drive myself crazy. That's really it, end quote. Well, I think there is something more you can do. You can speak to the authorities and tell him what he thinks about that kind of thing. So, I don't know, it feels like he's not being terribly helpful, is he? And you would think most people would be watching the news in his situation. If it was your future, and even the future of someone you once cared about was at stake, you'd imagine you would be watching the news like a hawk. You would be watching social media. Bear in mind, Colin and Kaitlin have a lot of shared business ventures together as well. So what happens to her has a bearing on him. According to The Sun, quote, Strickland says he is now only using a commuter bike to attend therapy sessions. Strickland said, quote, I'm not cycling at all. I've not ridden a bike in 6 weeks. But then, of course, he has been riding this therapy bike. And so he says, I've ridden a commuter bike about to go to therapy appointments, and that's really it. I'm hoping therapy will help with the situation. I'm really just getting started. It's a lot to process. I'm hoping it will help me find meaning in my life again at some point. I've been living in a state of shell shock. I need the required time to mourn and grieve. Pretty much everybody does. There's no explanation for it currently. It's going to take some time and retrospection. I think he means introspection. Some serious contemplation and retrospection. I think he means introspection, to get any kind of perspective on it. Then he was also asked about his reaction to being dropped by sponsors, and he said, everybody just wants to distance themselves from this event, which I completely understand. He said, they're reacting to the public's anger, which I also completely understand. I'm just in the position of, F my life, there's nothing really to say. It is what it is. I've never done anything to harm anybody, yet that's just the position I'm in, and there's no way to change that, unfortunately. End quote. Well, I would say that cheating on someone probably does harm somebody else. And in this case, it seems like it harmed two people, at least. Anyway, he goes on to say, quote, I wouldn't fight anybody on the impulse to distance themselves from this because it's just a foul situation. I'm not reading a lot on the internet right now because I think it would further my emotional distress. So I'm not sure who the public are angry at. I can't speak to that. Now, the article goes on to say that Colin Strickland confirmed that Mo Wilson and Kaitlin actually came face to face with one another at a cycling event in Arkansas in January of this year. Now, according to a police report, Wilson texted Strickland after the event to say, this is the event in January, to say, hey, with 2 exclamation marks, so, with 3 O's. So, I would like to talk to you at some point. I had originally texted you on Friday, but it appears my texts aren't going through again. This weekend was strange for me, and I just want to know what's going on. If you just want to be friends, seems to be the case, that's in brackets, then that's cool, but I'd like to talk about it because honestly my mind has been going in circles, and I don't know what to think. And then Colin Strickland responded in a text, hey Mo, I feel very shitty for putting you in a position where you don't feel comfortable. Kaitlin came along, ... In hindsight, this was not a good idea. Now, according to the article, Colin Strickland refused to elaborate any further on both of these women meeting in January or what Mo Wilson had meant with her message. And I don't know, you would think that he owes Mo's family an explanation for this at the very least. Instead, what he went on to say is, quote, I would like to say that Mariah and I had seen each other at no less than 4 events in 2022, and we had a completely platonic relationship and friendship. It's quite interesting that he refers to it as platonic relationship and friendship. It's unfortunate how that has been skewed out to be a salacious aspect to the story when it really wasn't the case. It's just unfortunate for her memory that it's been skewed that way. I don't feel like my words are really powerful right now, so I don't feel the need to set the record straight. I would tell you that Mo was an intelligent person and was not under the impression that we were in a romantic relationship. End quote. But clearly from the tone of one of her last texts, she didn't know the status of their relationship, and that's why she was asking him to clarify. If you're 25 years old and secretly meeting someone you've previously had a fling with at a swimming pool and then having dinner afterwards, what sort of message is that sending? Anyway, went on to say to the Sun, quote, if we were in a romantic relationship, we would have been romantic at these bicycle races that we were seeing each other at. We would have found private space, and that was not happening in any way, end quote. Except that that's what those texts all seem to be about, was that Kaitlin was with him and that they apparently couldn't find a private space, and that confused Mo. Anyway, one's also going to ask, what was the Deep Eddy pool about? Wasn't that a private space? And if it wasn't, what was it? And we can see clearly from the affidavit that Strickland wasn't being honest to Kaitlin about his whereabouts on the night of the incident. Austin PD also said, quote, Strickland originally acted as though he did not know who Wilson was, but eventually admitted to knowing her, end quote. So if he was lying to her, to the cops, and even to Wilson, how do we know what he's saying to us is genuine? What he's saying to the media is true? Remember on the night of the incident, he texted Kaitlin saying, hey, are you out? I went to drop some flowers for Alison at her son's house up north, and my phone died. So he's also talking about his phone, being off because the battery had died. Then he said, heading home unless you have another food suggestion. And so in the affidavit, it stresses that Strickland had lied about his whereabouts to Armstrong to hide he was with Wilson throughout the evening. That's on the night of the incident. On May 28, 2022, the New York Post quoted another anonymous woman from Austin's tight-knit cycling community telling it like it is, or at least how she saw it. She said, "Colin's a douche and a player. All he cares about now is covering his ass." So I'm not going to take it further than that. I am communicating with a chap in Austin, and we may be doing a live stream together on Tuesday. I'll let you guys know more about that, but we want to talk more about things like the financial narrative and getting to know Mo Wilson a little bit better, as well as what things are like on the ground in the Austin community from somebody who actually lives there. So keep your eyes open for that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.